Welcome to Cinema Chop Shop. Watch, chop, retrofit.
Plus somebody lifted his glove.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Glove thief?
Glove thief at
Well, times are tough. People have to make ends meet one way or the other.
I'm hoping that it's just some kid accidentally picked it up or whatever, but we did buy him another one today. But I was going to buy a glove so that we could, play, and so there went my glove.
Have a sentimental game of catch?
Yeah. Before I walk off into the cornfield.
Yeah, I was going to say, hey, Dad, want to have a catch?
But this is not a Field of Dreams podcast. This is Cinema Chop Shop. It is a movie podcast, close enough. We're together to talk about movies and such, and I'm your host, Shawn, by the way, but I'm joined with by Joey.
Hello.
And Todd.
Hello.
Todd got the date right.
Yeah,
he made it.
Right. Put it right down on the old calendar.
And today we're doing the long overdue celebration of the body of work of one Gene Hackman.
What a body of work it is, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Across decades, genres, everything, yeah.
Yeah, we won't dwell on his unfortunate demise. That was sad enough as it is. But we will focus on his work. And I think, Joey, you asked me earlier in the week, or actually, no, it was Travis, who unfortunately could not be here tonight. He kind of said, wasn't Gene Hackman just most of the time just a bad guy? He did play a bad guy very well.
It's interesting that
or
he said that because
morally ambiguous characters, I would say.
I think that hot on the heels of our New Hollywood episode, Gene Hackman kind of played into this disillusionment with the American dream, and his characters kind of reflected that.
He's the perfect postmodern guy. Not a completely bad guys with moral character and fiber, but who cross the lines or toe the lines between.
Yeah, except in a few cases he was contemptible, and we'll get into a few of those roles as we move along. True. But if you've never done one of these with us, this is a 16 seed bracket style tournament.
And I wanted to say too, like we talked about his body of work being a strong one earlier. Usually when we do these, the 14, 15, 16 seeds are kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel or sucking hind teeth, so to speak. Mm-hmm. This one rolls pretty deep. Like when we did our baseball movies episode.
Oh, yeah.
And the 16 seed was, oh, God, that awful Artie Lang comedy, Beer League.
Yeah.
There are no beer leagues in this one.
No, this reminds me of the Donald Sutherland bracket where they're all bangers. They're all really good films.
Well, another interesting thing about him, too, is that his career spans decades. You would think he was in his early 20s when he hit the scene. He was nearly 40 when he did Bonnie and Clyde, which was probably his first,
major
film
role. Yes.
And so the fact that he had such a long career speaks to just his longevity as well.
There were no Welcome to Mooseport in this bracket because we had plenty to choose from. Right. And also, again, for those of you who may not be aware of how we do this, these are ranked by their Rotten Tomatoes scores just to keep things fair. So the seedings are in that order from their top percentage down. And I think we excluded 3 films. I gave everyone 19 or 20 to choose from, and we kind of voted 3 of them out just because we either didn't want to watch them or we didn't particularly like them.
It seemed like the 3 I picked went off, so I assume we were mostly in agreement on the 3.
There was some overlap, but not much.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump right in because these do take a little while. So we'll just dispense with any other pleasantries and jump into the first bracket, and it is going to be 1971's The French Connection, with a 97% Rotten Tomatoes score, directed by the great William Friedkin, Gene Hackman, Roy Scheider, Sonny Grosso, Eddie Egan, Fernando Rey. A New York narcotics detective and his partner investigate a French drug ring shipping into the United States.
Don't be picking your toes, man.
It's a cop drama.
Yeah.
It's a gritty cop drama.
And as we were just alluding to, Popeye Doyle's one of these classic, morally ambiguous, towing the moral lines character, and we see it right off the bat. That's where I'm referencing that picking your toes line. Mm-hmm. You bully some guy in a bar into saying, hey, you were at the such and such. I can't remember. The guy's like, clearly wasn't where he was telling him that he was.
Yeah.
And he forced him to say it.
Yeah, he and Roy Scheider come into the African American establishment and just really just wreak havoc and pick out their two guys that are going to go to jail, and then go about finding their informant and asking him about what he knows.
Yep.
And then, of course, it leads into this very tangled web of a Frenchman who is heading up an illegal drug operation, smuggling drugs into the U.S. in an old beat up car in the floorboards and the runners of the car. One great chase sequence.
Oh yeah, one of the great car chases. And have you ever heard William Friedkin talk about doing this?
No.
They didn't have any kind at that time. They didn't have any kind of regulations about how to do it, and so they were literally just tearing through the streets of New York with no. I mean, they might cut off part of the street, but there wasn't any sort of pre-planning to it. They would just get someone out there to try to stop people for, it was highly dangerous the way that he described what they did.
Holy crap.
If not, reckless.
And even beyond the car chase, you've got the foot chase.
The subway dance.
The subway, in, out, in, out.
Yep.
That way that one's shot is amazing too. That one is as deft as the car sequences in like Bullet or something.
Yes,
just dancing in and out of the
and
trains.
Friedkin's editing mastery is on display there. So yeah,
I'm sure we'll talk more about this movie later because it's going up against Prime Cut from 1972. It's a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. Directed by Michael Ritchie. It's got Gene Hackman, Lee Marvin, Sissy Spacek, Janet Baldwin, Angel Tompkins, and Gregory Walcott. An exploration of the violent and bitter rivalries that exist within the gangland arena in America. A male Kansas gang leader named Mary Ann refuses to split the substantial spoils of an illegal operation with his Chicago partner who, enraged, in turn, hires an underworld enforcer to collect his money and teach the Kansas upstart a lesson.
We also see how the sausage is made, as it were, in this movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd never heard of this one until we did this bracket, and it turns out that it's a game 16 seed. It's a gritty crime drama, and it's got
country
a lot
style
going for it. Yeah, there's a scene, I won't give too much away because I encourage everybody to watch this movie, and many of our listeners probably have not seen it. I hadn't. There's a scene in the sunflower field later, which is just impeccably shot, I think. And this is, can we go ahead and jump into the voting here?
The world's most dangerous combine.
Yeah, there's that too, yeah.
Before we get into the voting, I do want to say Sissy Spacek, age 20, 22.
This is before she did some of the Kaylee and all that
playing
stuff,
a girl who is forced into this human trafficking thing that they've got going on, drugged out of her mind. She was gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
And Lee Marvin takes a liking to her and kind of rescues her. Captain Save-A-Ho kind of comes in and helps her out. And boy, I tell you what, Gene Hackman and his idiot brother, just contemptible redneckery.
Yeah.
And Joey and I both come from a childhood centering around hog meat processing production. And so we kind of shared some childhood trauma in this film. And boy, it's worth watching. Again, I think that it's a damn shame that it went up against French Connection because I'm voting for French Connection. It only gets better.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, this is like I said, like a game 16 seed. It came to play, and it was tied at halftime, but the French Connection just
probably one of the great action movies of all time.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
by default, I think it takes this one. But I will say this: had Prime Cut had a higher seeding, a better seeding, or a better first round matchup, it could have made a little run. I think.
I really like this movie.
Some of the higher.
I did too.
films.
Yeah,
It's weird.
It was 16. Yeah.
It definitely tickles my my funny bone when it comes to just odd, off the rails, kind of strange mob drama. It's really weird.
I guess you'd call something like country noir or something. Right?
Yeah,
Like a
yeah,
country
totally.
noir type
All
thing.
right, so jumping down to the next one, we're looking at the number 9 and the number 8 seeds. This is where we get into these that are kind of ranked similarly.
This one kind of interesting.
1995, Crimson Tide, directed by Tony Scott, starring Gene Hackman, Denzel Washington, James Gandolfini, George D'Souza, who we will see again, Viggo Mortensen, Matt Craven, and Steve Zahn. After the Cold War, a breakaway Russian republic with nuclear warheads becomes a possible worldwide threat. U.S. submarine captain Frank Ramsey, played by Gene Hackman, signs on a relatively green but highly recommended Lieutenant Commander Ron Hunter, played by Denzel, to the USS Alabama, which may be the only ship able to stop a possible Armageddon. When Ramsey insists that the Alabama must act aggressively, Hunter, fearing they will start rather than stop a disaster, leads a potential mutiny to stop him.
Now, I had never seen either of these movies before this week. And so Crimson Tide, I was actually surprised. Usually the boilerplate sort of action-type movie, which this is in that kind of category, isn't really my bag. But I thought this one did raise some kind of interesting philosophical questions about the role of leadership and these, what do you do in these types of it's almost like a real life situation where, do you press the button and have the train run off the track and hit one person, or in order to save everybody? The train dilemma, whatever you call that. But it's kind of like that almost.
I was just going to say, I think that people, American audiences anyway, in the 80s and 90s, post-Cold War, loved Russian sub movies.
Yeah.
There are so many. There's a whole sub genre. Get it? And this might be the gold standard of this.
This was one that was on all the time in the background. I was either finishing college or had just finished college, so didn't have 2 cents to rub together to go see too many movies, so I didn't see this one, but I remember people having it on rental. Never watched it until in preparation for this episode.
Okay, yeah. So same.
And not to give away the ending, but it does point out that, in a sense, both sides were following protocol.
Exactly.
It's just a matter of how you interpret naval code.
Yep.
And so
there's a mutiny, but who was guilty of the mutiny? And so that's another morally ambiguous situation for Hackman. And then, of course, you have the great mano-a-mano acting between him and Denzel. So I was surprised. I liked it.
And so we're going head-to-head with another 1995 movie, Get Shorty, with an 89% Rotten Tomatoes score, directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, starring John Travolta, Danny DeVito, Rene Russo, Gene Hackman, Delray Lindo, again, James Gandolfini in the head-to-heads, and Dennis Farina. Chili Palmer, played by John Travolta, is a Miami mobster who gets sent by his boss, the psychopathic Bones Barboni, played by Dennis Farina, to collect a bad debt from Harry Zim, played by Gene Hackman, a Hollywood producer who specializes in cheesy horror films. When Chili meets Harry's leading lady, Rene Russo, the romantic sparks fly. After pitching his life story as a movie idea, Chili learns that being a mobster and being a Hollywood producer really aren't all that different. Joey, you said at the beginning of this bracket.
Yeah, this one to me is a blowout. I don't, and this is perhaps just my personal taste. I don't like Get Shorty. I do not. I saw it in the theaters. I saw it at least once in the time since. And like you pointed out that, I think in your Letterboxd review, Shawn, that you don't like movies about movie making.
Generally speaking, yeah.
This one does that, and to me, there's just John Travolta's character is. I think this was right after Pulp Fiction. I think. And
I think isn't the rumor that Tarantino did some like ghostwriting of the script, or he was in the production type thing?
For whatever reason, this one to me just wallows in like terminal hipness, and I don't like this movie. I think Crimson Tide wins going away in this one for me.
I felt that Travolta was coming off the popularity of Pulp Fiction. He essentially was playing the same character, and that put a bad taste in my mouth right away. Again, a movie about making movies puts a bad taste in my mouth. There's just a lot about this movie that I don't like. And
agreed.
For that reason, I vote for Crimson Tide.
I actually liked Get Shorty. I get exactly what you're saying about the Chili Palmer character. It definitely was derivative of his Pulp Fiction character. However, I did enjoy the script. I found myself chuckling a bunch of times. I liked the Gene Hackman character. Since this is the podcast, we should kind of mention the character that he played, who's sort of a feckless producer who has a gambling problem, and cracked me up after he gets his ass kicked towards the end of the movie, and he's like trying to hold it together with a neck brace on. He can't hardly talk because his jaw's broken, I think. Anyway, nevertheless, I did like the movie, but I do think Crimson Tide is probably the better film.
And if you want to put Gene Hackman against Gene Hackman, I think his performance in Crimson Tide is more powerful.
Yeah.
Although I did find him funny in this. I thought he was probably one of the
So I enjoyed Get Shorty. I didn't hate it like you guys did, but I didn't think it was a classic or anything. Interestingly, though, Gandolfini was in both, which was odd. But
it's strange that they ended up in the same bracket.
Yeah.
All right, moving right along. We're going to look at number 5, No Way Out from 1987. It's a 92%er.
More Cold War.
Directed by Roger Donaldson, starring Kevin Costner, a very skinny Kevin Costner, Gene Hackman, Shawn Young, Will Patton, and George DeZunza.
This is Will Patton's movie, by the way.
It is Will Patton's movie.
Yeah.
Naval Lieutenant Tom Farrell, played by Kevin Costner, meets a young woman, Susan Atwell, played by Shawn Young, and they share a passionate fling. Farrell then finds out that his superior, Defense Secretary David Bryce, played by Gene Hackman, is also romantically involved with Atwell. When the young woman turns up dead, Farrell is put in charge of the murder investigation. He begins to uncover shocking clues about the case, but when details of his encounter with Susan surface, he becomes a suspect as well.
Yeah. But Will Patton was great in this movie. It is his movie. Gives a lot of Smithers energy.
Yes.
When you think about it, with
Dwight Schrute energy too.
Yes.
With Hackman being the Monty Burns character. I really like this movie quite a bit. I'd never heard of it before.
Same.
I just the Patton character, when he starts driving the narrative, kind of surprised me a bit, because the Hackman character, of course, is the big wig. He kills this woman, and he's ready to give himself up right away. He's like, I just want to talk to somebody before I go and turn. And Will Patton's like, no, he hatches
but
this
actually,
plan.
sir.
Yeah, right. And he's like, really? You think we're going to get away with this? He's like, no,
Well, what the synopsis doesn't mention is that you have this character, Yuri, the Russian agent, who is supposedly within the Department of Defense, and they're using Yuri as the scapegoat for this.
And then a lot of Usual Suspects
mythical
energy. I have to figure Usual Suspects came out after this. So,
Yes.
but I won't give anything else away other than that. But
I did enjoy the Department of Defense as kind of the stage for this walls closing in.
Yeah.
Like, you really got to know the architecture of this, because Kevin Costner, it's so funny. If you've watched this week's episode of Abbott Elementary, the school board comes to inspect the school to see if they've been illegally getting school supplies from the neighboring golf course. And they're literally moving the school supplies into other rooms as the school board's walking through the building, which is exactly what Kevin Costner's doing through this whole movie, is like trying to get ahead of this investigation because he's afraid he's going to be fingered because it looks like it's him.
yeah, you're right. The Secretary of Defense, or the building is like, or the Pentagon, I guess it is, right? It's like its own little ecosystem closing in on it.
Joey's been chomping at the bit to say something.
Well, I was gonna say, I watched this movie with Todd, and the whole time I was making this joke that, like, oh, there's a plot twist. Shawn Young is an android, because I know her from Blade Runner,
Right.
There is a plot twist in this movie. It's not that, and I won't give it away, but it's a literal last-minute plot twist. And
that's why I mentioned the Usual
I
Suspects.
think that for a lot, I think it's a polarizing one. I think that for a lot of audiences, people in the audience would leave going, "Oh, wow." I kind of did an eye roll. And
For me,
I thought that it almost threw it off the trail. This is a good damn movie.
It's a great movie, but the minute the plot twist hits, it's like a deflating balloon.
It really is. Yeah.
I would want to watch it again, though, to see. Do you get any breadcrumbs? I feel like you didn't.
There's
really.
one. There's one big one. I actually put it back on kind of while I was doing some email and work one day after this, and there is one big one, but it's nothing that you would necessarily note at the time unless you were looking for something like that.
Yeah.
All right, well then let's just jump right into its opponent, the number 12 seed, the Royal Tenenbaums. From 2001, 81% Rotten Tomatoes, directed by Wes Anderson, starring Luke Wilson, Owen Wilson, Gwyneth Paltrow, Ben Stiller, Gene Hackman, Bill Murray, Angelica Houston, Danny Glover, and the narrator, Alec Baldwin. Royal Tenenbaum and his wife, Ethelene, had 3 children, and then they separated. All 3 children are extraordinary, all geniuses. Virtually all memory of the brilliance of the young Tenenbaums was subsequently erased by 2 decades of betrayal, failure, and disaster. Most of this was generally considered to be their father's fault. The Royal Tannenbaums is the story of the family's sudden, unexpected reunion one recent winter.
When this bracket first came out, I had this kind of circled as a hot, sexy upset pick. As we know, there's always a 12-5 upset in the NCAA tournament, as we unfortunately know,
Clemson fans
our
know,
beloved Clemson Tigers fell prey to it this week. But this one the Royal Tenenbaums is beloved, and it was going up against a movie that I had never heard of. Now, once I did watch No Way Out, I thought, maybe there's going to be some drama here. So this to me is the only first round matchup that I waffled back and forth about.
Oh, really? Okay, because you were pretty at the beginning of the bracket. You were like, hell yeah. Todd, what are your thoughts?
I had similar thoughts. I've always been fond of the Royal Tenenbaums, but it had been quite a long time since I'd seen it, maybe 10 or 15 years or so. And then after watching No Way Out, I put on the Royal Tenenbaums, and I didn't like it as much as this time as I remembered. It's a little convoluted. It's a little precious. I like some of the other Wes Anderson stuff better. I'm still a Rushmore stan. It's just one of the tighter ones that he does. It's where his aesthetic was still new. And I'm going to have to go with No Way Out in the actual the 5 seed pulling the upset over the 12 seed.
Interesting. When the Royal Tenenbaums came out, I was misled by the marketing campaign. I don't know if you remember the commercials, but it was played up like it was a slapstick comedy. Mm-hmm. You've got this old man running around with little boys in matching tracksuits, hopping on garbage trucks. Wackiness, right?
Yeah.
So when I saw the Royal Tenenbaums, I was put out. I didn't like it. However, as I've gotten to know Wes Anderson's movies and his work and his sensibilities, on subsequent viewings of the film, I say, okay, now I get it. I like it. And it's all broken down by this whole dysfunctional, narcissistic father who at the very core thinks of no one but himself, and all of the chaos that emanates from his selfishness makes up the movie. And in that regard, Wes Anderson really distills what a lot of people have dealt with when it comes to having a father figure who is 100% about themselves. And now I look at it and I'm like, okay, I get it. I like it. And Gene Hackman's performance is really good because to the end, he's still a narcissist, but there's a little bit of chipping away of some of the exterior by the end of the film. And it's in that regard, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I think Todd said he did not like it as much upon a rewatch this week. And I think that like this happens to me when I rewatch some of Wes Anderson's early movies. I like Wes Anderson. It's a pity that Travis isn't here to talk about this one because he's kind of a fanboy of Wes Anderson. But I like Wes Anderson's movies, but they get so samey in just aesthetically, in that kind of detached character. The way his characters are written is very detached. And it suffers a little bit from sameness after a while. So I think that's why sometimes when I go back and watch early ones like this, I don't like them quite as much. And that's what kind of clouded the water here for me a little bit.
And I'll tell you another part, though. I kept thinking of a movie that came out after this one that I thought was a more controlled, distilled version of this movie, which is Noah Baumbach's Squid and the Whale, where Jeff Daniels is the self-centered, and actually both parents are kind of self-centered, but I thought it was it's a kind of a similar premise, but it was a little bit more controlled. It was a bit more relatable with just the standard nuclear family, 2 kids, the parents divorcing, and I don't know. For some reason, I was juxtaposing it with that in my mind, and so that might have been part of it for me as well. Anyway.
I'm going to leave this one up to because you voted for No Way Out.
Yeah, I did.
I'm going to leave this one up to Shawn because
I'm gonna break it down to performances, and I think that Gene Hackman's performance in Royal Tenenbaums is better than his performance in No Way Out.
Okay,
that's fair.
I think he's kind of one-dimensional in No Way Out.
Yeah,
so I'm the
fair,
deciding voter.
You are the decider, George
I'm going to
Bush.
go with the Royal Tenenbaums for 2 reasons. One is that literal last-minute twist that we talked about earlier.
Yep.
If it weren't for that, I may have switched my vote here. It doesn't ruin the movie, so to speak, but it does kind of deflate it somewhat, as Shawn said. Secondly, I feel like Travis should have a voice here. He's not with us this week, but if he were here, he 1,000% would have voted for the Royal Tenenbaums in this case. So I'm going to channel him. I'm going to vote Royal Tenenbaums and put it through as an upset into the second round.
You just don't want Trump to tweet about you, about your liberal craziness. And anyway.
Moving right along, number 13, Mississippi Burning, 1988, 79%. Directed by Alan Parker, starring Gene Hackman, Willem Dafoe, Frances McDormand, Brad Dourif, Michael Rooker, and Stephen Tobolowsky. When a group of civil rights workers go missing in a small Mississippi town, FBI agents Alan Ward and Rupert Anderson are sent in to investigate. Local authorities refuse to cooperate with them, and the African-American community is afraid to, precipitating a clash between the two agents over strategy. As the situation becomes more volatile, the direct approach is abandoned in favor of more aggressive hardline tactics.
More moral ambiguity from Mr. Hackman.
Yeah.
You got the more straight-line Defoe character. And then Hackman, likable. You understand where he's coming from, but he's willing to bend those rules, baby.
And he takes a shine to Frances McDormand, who is married to one of the most definitely a perpetrator of the crime.
Yep.
Brad Dourif.
a.k.a. Chucky.
Yep. So he is dipping the pen in the company ink a little bit. Not quite, but he wants to.
Frances McDormand, by the way, was pretty babylicious in this.
She looked great, doesn't she? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I will mention some of the things I said on Letterboxd about this. I grew up 3 counties north of this, where this took place, in Neshoba County. They call it Jesper County, which is...
Because it is loosely based on a true story.
Oh, it's very based on a true story, but they changed the names and changed the county. But it's Neshoba County, which is where Philadelphia, Mississippi is, where they disenfranchised the Native American people when they disenfranchised the black population as well, which kept them from a lot of things that were rightfully theirs. But they got
covered all this when we talked about Flaming Star.
Yeah, they got theirs in the end when they got their casino. So anyway, the palpable racism, the overt racism of those 1963, I think, is when this takes place. I was born in 73, and I can tell you that growing up in post-segregation Mississippi, that those caricatures of those evil, heinous people are very much real. Real people, and they're...
It wasn't that much different growing up in lower rural Lexington County, South Carolina.
Or the Green Sea Floyds area of South Carolina in the 80s, yeah.
So in that regard, the movie gets high marks. The problem I have with the film, however, is the white savior narrative and the sheer lack of... and it's kind of unfair because you got to commit to a storyline and you've got to tell the story. And if you're going to tell it from the agent's point of view, then it is going to have a white narrative. So, but the black narrative from this is marginalized in that they are collateral damage for the most part in this film.
And then there's a little boy who is the only one who kind of is willing to speak out, at least initially, to get the ball rolling.
So the film is not without problems.
And
then, of course... I'll shut up. What do you guys think?
I agree with everything you said. This one is paired up against Superman, which if we just are comparing subject matter, obviously is much more frivolous than this movie. So it's a little bit of an awkward matchup, I think, for that reason. But I think that this, and I hope I'm not giving away my vote quite yet, but this is an important movie, but it's not necessarily a great one. Yeah. And for the reasons that Shawn mentioned, and there are better movies that cover similar ground than Mississippi Burning.
I might push back a little bit against the white savior because I think part of the point of the movie is that moral ambiguity. Hackman sort of resorts to these kind of strongman tactics that I don't think that we're supposed to necessarily approve of. Yeah. And things don't necessarily... I mean, yes, we see the guys getting rolled out and they all go to prison terms that aren't that long, really, 5 to 10 years. I think that despicable sheriff, who, by the way, was the cook in Ernest Goes to Camp, most memorably.
It wouldn't be a cinema chop shop if Todd didn't make an Ernest reference. So there you go. Yeah.
But he didn't go to prison at all. So, I mean, I get the white savior part of it, but I also think that it's not entirely that. It's like almost like these two characters with Defoe and Hackman sort of fighting it out to determine what actually constitutes justice and where are the moral lines and what is worth crossing and that. So I actually maybe liked it a little bit better than you guys did for that reason.
I don't hate it. I just think that it does have some problems that Shawn has. I do think it's worth noting, though, that as we just established, the degree of separation between Gene Hackman and Ernest P. Worrell is, or Jim Varney, is one.
Yes. I forget that actor's name, but whoever played the sheriff, yeah.
All right, moving right along, we're going to go up against, as Joey mentioned, Superman, the movie. Very important, Superman, the movie. 1978, 93% Rotten Tomatoes, directed by Richard Donner, starring Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder, Gene Hackman, Ned Beatty, Marlon Brando, Valerie Perrin, Jeff East, and Glenn Ford. Just before the destruction of the planet Krypton, scientist Jor-El sends his infant son Kal-El on a spaceship to Earth, raised by kindly farmers Jonathan and Martha Kent. Young Clark discovers the source of his superhuman powers and moves to Metropolis to fight evil. As Superman, he battles the villainous Lex Luthor, while as novice reporter Clark Kent, he attempts to woo co-worker Lois Lane.
I was so looking forward to seeing this one. This is one of the very first movies that I ever remember seeing in the drive-in theater in Monetta, South Carolina, where I got us kicked out, apparently, for turning the lights on repeatedly because I was like a toddler.
Nice.
And so when I went to rewatch it, I was expecting it to not age quite as well. I'd seen it a few more times, as a kid.
Oh, you're gonna say it.
But I had it conflated with the sequels.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, which we'll get into maybe later if it goes through. But I sat down to watch this movie, and I ate a gummy, and I sat down to watch this movie. And for the first act, I was like, holy shit, this totally holds up. The first act of this movie is a masterclass in comic book, fantasy realm, world building, and origin stories. Like the part of it that happens on Krypton is fucking amazing. And it looks dated, but it looks cool as shit.
Yeah.
And the first act of the movie is great. It suffers for me a little bit when it gets to Metropolis. It gets kind of, by the numbers.
Golly gee.
Yeah. And there's one thing later in the movie that maybe I'm just expecting too much
From a comic book
movie. I'm expecting hard sci-fi from a comic book movie. But when Superman flies backward, flies around the Earth backwards.
Oh, that's a huge problem for a lot of people.
Reverse time. That makes time doesn't just happen on the Earth.
Yeah.
It's a universal constant. It makes no sense.
It's like playing a record backwards.
Yeah. So if you can overlook that, which is difficult, it remains a pretty damn good movie and the first modern superhero comic book movie.
Yeah.
Now that is a legacy much like the rock band Kiss. Mm-hmm. Very influential. Mm-hmm. Not all,
Well, let's talk about Gene Hackman in this as Lex Luthor.
He's great.
Maybe it's because I saw it as a child, but for me, this is the measuring stick by which all Lex Luthors will be measured. And to this day, nobody has come close.
His performance, much like the movie itself, toes that line between camp and kind of taking itself seriously, and it works. And he is, I agree with you. Maybe it's just we're about the same age. He is Lex Luthor for me.
Yeah, he is a little rascally, which I think is necessary for the time. They didn't want him to be too scary because we are talking about a family film. However, when I was a kid, I was perplexed. Why did Lex Luthor have hair? And then when the wig comes off, boy, that blew my mind.
Yeah, same.
But he's Lex Luthor. And no one else has been able to change that opinion for any other iteration.
This may be genre bias because I'm very ambivalent about superhero movies to begin with, number one. And number two, Superman is the most boring, uninteresting superhero of them all.
I beg to differ. I think that he is the most basic one, but if you get into his backstory, he's actually
the
one
alien
of the
stuff,
more
which I also
ones.
disagree with. I thought the special effects were just laughable. Now, if we're watching it on the Mystery Science 3000 scale, is it interesting? Sure. Now, Hackman's performance in this, I agree, was terrific. Again, maybe, you guys watched it when you were kids. I was a little too young. 78, I wasn't born yet. And I probably didn't watch it for the first time until I was already, 17, 18. I don't like the genre to begin with. So for me, it was just kind of meh. But I do get the Hackman part of it. He's the best part of that movie for sure. Very chilling in that role. So I get that part of it. But not crazy about it myself.
All right, who's your pick?
I mean, I'm probably going to get outvoted. I'm going with Mississippi Burning, but
Joey?
I'm going Superman.
I'm going Superman.
yeah.
Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack. We promise to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, your sweet tooth. So visit our refreshment center now. Let's go.
So we're at the halfway point of the brackets. So I think Joey has brought a beer that is on theme.
Yeah, do we have some tasting glasses?
I don't have any tasting
We'll
glasses.
just,
I didn't know that there would
I'll
be
just open my mouth and you pour it right
Okay.
in.
So this is an on-theme beer. Upcoming as the 11 seed, we have the Poseidon Adventure, which I literally just watched a few days ago for the first time.
For the
And
first time?
so
Okay.
I scoured the local Mickey Finn's for an on-theme beer today, and I found a West Coast style IPA called Stories of Sea Captains.
Oh, lovely.
Nice.
From
That kind of ties into Crimson Tide as well.
Coast
Yeah.
Brewing.
Yeah, Coast in Charleston.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was that local. Okay, cool.
Yeah, they're one of the OGs.
So if you guys want to swig out of this, it's a West Coast IPA. It is
It is danky danky.
it is danky dank.
Whoo, man.
I like getting these kinds of beers, especially in the situation like we're probably gonna grill out tomorrow.
Nice.
And what usually happens when we do that is I have the precise amount of beers that I want to drink for the day, right? And my wife will be like, "No, I'm not gonna drink today." And then once we get outside and I got
She gets
I
hot
got the
and-
JBL speaker, poured up, and the burgers are on the grill. She's like, I think I will have a beer. And if I have what I drank first when I came in here, which was the Mango Crush, she just fucks the ratio all up. It's like I wanted precisely 4 beers, now I have 3.
Yeah.
She will take one sip of this and be like, "Oh no, thanks." So,
Yeah. So that's the key, is just buy beers she won't like.
Yeah.
I really like your impression of your wife. That's really funny. I'm sure she'll appreciate that. All right, moving right along. Boy, we are really just...
Yeah, because we still have to keep going after the...
God, we
the
just
first
like to
round.
talk. All right, so number 3 in the bracket, The Conversation from 1974, 93%, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Gene Hackman, Harrison Ford, John Cazale, Frederick Forrest, Cindy Williams, and Terry Garr. Surveillance expert Harry Call, played by Hackman, is hired by mysterious client's brusque aide, played by Harrison Ford, to tail a young couple, Mark and Anne. Anne, of course, played by Cindy Williams. Tracking the pair through San Francisco's Union Square, Call and his associate Stan manage to record a cryptic conversation between them. Tormented by memories of a previous case that ended badly, Call becomes obsessed with the resulting tape, trying to determine if the couple are in danger.
All right. Well, so a lot of people consider this a part of a spiritual trilogy with Blow Up, which is the Michelangelo Antonione's great British film.
Yep.
And then The Conversation in the middle, and then
Blow
Blow
Out.
Out by Brian De Palma. So Blow Up, of course, is a photographer who investigates a crime. The Conversation is a specialist in audio who investigates a crime. And then, of course, in Blow Out, John Travolta plays an editing expert who investigates a crime. So, in any case, all 3 films fantastic. I love this movie. Maybe my favorite Francis Ford Coppola movie, even more than The Godfather.
It only gets better.
Yes,
with
every
each
watching. Gene Hackman said it was his favorite performance of all
I
of
can
his
believe it. I can believe it.
films. Yeah, so
just the sound editing and just the technical aspects of this movie are fucking phenomenal. And a lot of times when there's a movie that kind of hangs its hat on those kind of things, sometimes it'll leave me a little bit cold.
Yeah.
This one, though, delivers on story, too, and it is one of the absolute classics of world cinema.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's save some comments for this one because I get the feeling it's going to blow right through the next.
Yeah.
Its opponent is number 14, The Firm, from 1988, 76% on Rotten Tomatoes, directed by Sidney Pollack, starring Tom Cruise, Gene Hackman, Gene Triplehorn, Holly Hunter, Wilfred Brimley, Ed Harris, and Gary Busey. A young lawyer joins a small but prestigious law firm only to find out that most of their clients are on the wrong side of the law. The company is helping to launder mob money, get clients off charges, and even murder partners who threaten to blow their cover. But when the FBI come calling to gather evidence on the lawyer's colleagues, he is caught between a rock and a hard place, juggling his life and his liberty. This, of course, based on the big blockbuster novel from John Grisham that started John Grisham's career of all of his legal-themed adventure novels.
I'm just going to quote the John Lovitz cartoon, The Critic, that was about another John Grisham book/film, Pelican Brief, which was Pelican Brief more like turkey too long. And that's how I feel about The Firm.
I pride myself on preparing well for this podcast, and so all of the movies that we're discussing, I have either seen in the past and brushed up on a couple, with the skim through this week, or not. This one I saw in the past a long time ago, probably around the time it came out in the late 90s. I could not bring myself to watch it. I fucking hated it when it came out. Yeah. I just don't. It's probably even worse than I remember it, but here's my thing about Tom Cruise. I have never, and I mean literally never, watched a movie starring Tom Cruise that I lost myself in.
Yeah.
Every time I see him on the screen, I think, there's Tom Cruise acting. I have never not seen him as himself. He's all
This movie is so boilerplate. There's even a scene at the beginning where he does cartwheels and shit.
It goes beyond that for me. John Grisham, I lived through it because he was a Mississippi writer while I lived in Mississippi, and people went ape shit over the fact that they had a Mississippi boy who had done well, and so we were pressured into liking John Grisham's shit. John Grisham, however, if you've ever just pick up one of his books and read his description of the female characters. It's always
he's not a good writer.
It's always a paragraph long, and it's always based on, well, she was the kind of girl who went to church on Sunday, and her grandmother was so and so, and it's just terrible, rotten. So fuck this film. I say The Conversation.
This should have been the 16 seed.
I know The Firm
Agreed.
is easily the worst movie on this list.
And piggybacking what Joey said, I've watched every single movie in this bracket at least once. I've watched all of the movies in the bracket in the last 2.5 weeks, except for Superman and The Firm. I would not watch The Firm because I just don't like it.
Good.
All right, so we're pushing the conversation on. Moving along. Number 11, The Poseidon Adventure, 1972, 81%, directed by Ronald Neame, starring Gene Hackman, Shelley Winters, Carol Lindley, Ernest Borgnine, Red Buttons, Pamela Sue Martin, Stella Stevens, Jack Albertson, and Roddy McDowell. En route from New York City to Greece on New Year's Eve, majestic passenger ship the SS Poseidon is overtaken by tidal waves. With the captain dead, surviving passengers, including the passionate Reverend Scott, played by Hackman, they band together in the ship's ballroom. The group struggles to avoid fires, flooding, structural instability, and mechanical malfunctions as they make their way through a maze of ladders and tunnels in their desperate attempt to escape a watery grave. This is the grandfather of the disaster movies that pervaded throughout the 1970s and early 80s.
It would later be lampooned with the Leslie Nielsen, what were they?
Airplane, yeah. It's okay. It's a who's who of who was popular at the time.
Yeah,
Shelley Winters, who I can't fucking stand, is annoying as hell in this. And when she dies in the movie, spoilers, I cheer every single time I watch this movie.
Oh, boo!
I hate Shelley
When she
Winters.
does her little swimming thing,
Yes,
and it's like,
yes.
she's been
I have
bitching
no
and
soul,
complaining, and
Joey.
It's boilerplate. It's kind of predictable a little bit, and then it starts to get kind of dull because they're just going through this labyrinth, which I get, but it's all samey.
It screams TV movie.
Yeah.
And
I like that, y'all.
It's fine.
It's enjoyable.
It's
yeah.
enjoyable. It's
Yeah.
perfectly
Don't get me
enjoyable.
wrong. It's enjoyable.
And I like Hackman as sort of the cynical priest, because at the very beginning of the movie, he's like cynical as hell.
The only thing I love this movie. I'd never seen it before. I was aware of it, but I'd never seen it before. The only thing that I really dock it for is it has the worst theme song. There has to be a morning after.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, God, yeah.
That's fucking
That's good
terrible.
lead-in though. For we're gonna have it out on the next.
All right, let's jump into its opponent. Number 6, Hoosiers from 1986, 91%, directed by David Anspaugh, Gene Hackman, Dennis Hopper, and then all the basketball players who you've never heard of. Brad Boyle, Kent Poole, no relation to Joey Poole, Maris Valanis, who sounds like a villain, Wade Shinnick, and Barbara Hershey.
And we should note music by Jerry Goldsmith.
Fuck you, Jerry Goldsmith. It's not about you, Jerry. God damn it. Stop
Shawn-
trying to steal the spotlight.
Sean texted us about this week, and I gotta say, I disagree. I love Jerry. I like being manipulated by him in the sports movies because it's okay in that genre to manipulate me and let me know that I need to have uplifting.
You need to feel the feels. This was
yeah.
Jerry Goldsmith's foray into like synth music, though, which does not match up to the
1950
era of this fucking movie. Again, Jerry, it's not about you. Fuck that guy. I can't stand him. All right, the synopsis. Failed college coach Norman Dale gets a chance at redemption when he is hired to direct the basketball program at a high school in a tiny Indiana town after a teacher persuades star player Jimmy Chitwood to quit and focus on his long-neglected studies. Dale struggles to develop a winning team in the face of community criticism for his temper and his unconventional choice of assistant coach Shooter, a notorious alcoholic.
Yes.
My question about this movie: how much has Jimmy got to study?
Yeah.
Because I mean, you practice basketball for an hour, a couple of hours after school, 4 times a week. You have a game or 2 a week. Jimmy, get your shit together.
Jimmy,
man.
he's got so much on him.
Because that's his obsession, man. You don't understand.
Jimmy-
He's like Kobe Bryant. He's
So let me put this movie in perspective.
actually, that's not a good comparison.
Jimmy
'cause Kobe Bryant is Italian.
Jimmy Chitwood is Teen Wolf.
Yeah.
In
It
this
is
movie.
kind of a Teen Wolfy type movie.
This would have been a much better
now
film
look.
had someone turned into a werewolf on the court.
I'm a sucker for a good inspirational sports movie. I love this movie.
well
The thing
documented.
that bothers me the most about this movie, though, honestly, is the team that they play at the end is like almost an all-black team with a black coach, and that might be historically accurate because it is based off of a real thing. But it's
But
like
you gotta acknowledge
change that.
it.
Just change that,
or acknowledge it somehow,
or acknowledge it in some other way. They
make
didn't
it-
even,
yeah.
I don't know. Either acknowledge it or leave it out and just have it be, because it's harder to, knowing what we know about the 50s, it just makes it harder to, get into
Does
it.
anyone have anything else to add about this movie before we go into the vote?
I don't.
All right, Todd.
I mean, Hoosiers, easy.
Hoosiers, obviously.
This is genre against genre for me, and Hoosiers is solidly middle of the pack, inspirational sports movie. The Poseidon Adventure is arguably the gold standard of the 70s disaster film. I'm going Poseidon Adventure.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So,
don't-
now
let's
it's-
break the tie.
I don't like Hoosiers. I do not like this movie.
Really?
I don't like inspirational sports movies in general. I especially do not like this one.
Well, you're wrong.
I used to like Hoosiers, but I think that as I've gotten older and more worldly wise, I see Hoosiers as a big flaming pile of just sentimental bullshit. And Todd, you can thank Jerry Goldsmith for this. I'm going with Poseidon Adventure.
Oh,
Oh, you
another
bastards.
upset. The 11 seed.
I'm gonna
joins
get-
the 12 seed in the second round.
I'm gonna get Trump to tweet about you motherfuckers, or actually a soch about you, I guess, whatever the fuck.
I mean, if I'm going with a Shelley Winters movie over Hoosiers.
Here's what I thought. Here's my thought process. I thought when this is one of the ones that I honestly did not know how it was going to go. Except I don't like Hoosiers a lot. But at the end of the day, if we had to sit down and watch one of these movies right now, 1,000% I would go with the Poseidon Adventure.
1,000% Hoosiers, and I'll probably never watch the Poseidon Adventure again. Like, I agree with Shawn. Like TV movie all day.
Okay, here we go. But it's so much fun.
Yeah.
It's so much fun to see those
You
people
could drink every
fine.
time somebody dies.
Yeah.
Or,
And I love Gene Hackman's end.
And I wasn't expecting Homegirl to fall into the fire.
I know, right?
Well, during Hoosiers, you can drink every time Goldsmith gives you goosebumps.
No, he does not. All right, here we go. This is a fun bracket. Number 7, Bonnie and Clyde, 1967, 90% Rotten Tomatoes, directed by Arthur Penn. Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway, Gene Hackman, Estelle Parsons, Michael J. Pollard, Gene Wilder. Small-time crook Clyde Barrow tries to steal a car and winds up with its owner's daughter, dissatisfied small-town girl Bonnie Parker. Their crimes quickly spiral from petty theft to bank robbery, but tensions between the couple and their other members of their gang. Hapless driver C.W., Clyde's suave older brother Buck, played by Gene Hackman, and Buck's flibberty gibbert wife, Blanche, could destroy them all. Okay, so this, along with The Graduate, is one of the...
Kicks off New Hollywood,
absolutely.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And Gene Hackman, as you mentioned, is one of his first big roles.
And he's in his late 30s at this point.
And this film, produced by Warren Beatty, when Hackman auditioned for this, Warren Beatty said to the director, "Don't lose this guy. I want this guy." Mm-hmm. He was sold on Gene Hackman. Mm. And it's not a huge part. He's the brother. He's around for about 50% of the movie,
it's
maybe.
It's memorable.
It is important.
He's very good.
And without Gene Hackman, you don't have his annoying wife, who every time something bad happens.
Yeah.
I was really looking forward to this one. I've never seen it before.
So I saw it for the first time just a couple years ago too. I was underwhelmed. It's fine. It's okay.
I was somewhat underwhelmed too. I didn't dislike it as much as you did, but I did find in your review you said that it's kind of it's quaint by today's standards, and to me it mines similar territory as Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Which
that
again
kind of
is also
to me that one holds up more. But.
Revisionist Western, also kind of New Hollywood in its own way.
This one doesn't do it quite as well, but it's an interesting movie, and it's perhaps a flawed one. It's gonna be an interesting matchup with the next movie.
The next film in tone is a completely different film. Go ahead.
I was just going to say we'll do this perhaps later, but I'm going to channel Travis. I have a bit of trivia about this film later, so we'll do this.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was just like the narrative. This is what I said in my review. The narrative of a kind of iconoclastic outlaw sticking it to the man is as familiar as Mom's apple pie at this point. So, like, it's.
It is. You mentioned Butch Cassidy. It has this lightheartedness, despite having this really heavy subject matter. Mm-hmm. For God's sake, someone gets shot in the face in this movie on film in the '60s. So there is, some rough shit in the midst of this kind of almost slapstick, almost wacky, almost Keystone Cop, but not quite. And so there is a problem there because you do have these two despicable characters, and yet you're meant to like them. Which again, New Hollywood, anti-hero,
exactly the anti-hero.
It's interesting too that the way that they chose to portray the Clyde character. He's impotent in this film. He's kind of like what the kids would call asexual.
Yes.
Which apparently is not at all like he was in real life. Apparently he was bisexual and very promiscuous. But they made that decision because they thought that having him be a sexual deviant, so to speak, would have been too off-putting for audiences.
Interesting.
It's going head-to-head with number 10's bracket, Night Moves from 1975, 84% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is directed by Arthur Penn. Again, head-to-head Arthur Penn movies. Gene Hackman, Melanie Griffith, Jennifer Warren, James Woods, Susan Clark, and John Crawford. Hard-nosed private investigator Harry Mosby, to distract himself from a rapidly deteriorating marriage, takes a case from an aging B-movie queen, played by Janet Ward, to locate her runaway daughter, Deli, played by a very young Melanie Griffith. His search takes him to Florida Keys, where the girl has been hiding out with her stepfather, Tom, played by John Crawford, and Tom's lover, Paula, played by Jennifer Warren. Harry initiates an affair with Paula and soon learns the case is more complex than he first assessed it.
Big fan of this movie. One of the early neo-noirs. The performances are fantastic. I love the setting in that kind of... I don't know how you describe it. It's like the...
Beach shack compound?
Beach shack compound thing, whatever you want to call it. Terrific. And then the twist that comes in kind of the middle of the movie, because it starts out as like looking for the Melanie Griffith character, and then it turns into this whole other thing with the dead pilot that they find, and the editing is great. I mean, I just love everything about this movie. Great performance by Hackman. I was disappointed that during the 50% off flash sale, I was going to get Night Moves, but it's still 2 weeks away from coming out, and so it was not part of the sale. But yeah, great film.
I really like this movie. The only thing that was off-putting for me about the movie is the amount of globe-trotting that happens back and forth.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah.
It's in service of the story.
It is. It is. Very young, nubile Melanie Griffith.
Yeah, it's a very Jodie Foster vibes in Taxi Driver almost. I mean, different kinds of roles, but just the fact that they were
She's
both so young.
She's playing it at like 16.
Yeah,
she's like 22,
like
but very much a complete unabashed nudist.
Right, exactly.
Gene Hackman gets played a little bit, as you would in a noir, by the woman.
Mm-hmm.
The true villain is not revealed until the end. It ticks a lot of boxes.
The ending is whew.
And if you're a fan of diving, there's something to see in this movie. You'll like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Joey, you're being quiet.
I don't have anything to add. You guys have covered all. I
Okay.
just watched this one for the very first time literally yesterday, and you guys basically said everything I want to say about it. It is, as a neo-noir is set in the 70s should be, it is exceptionally sleazy.
Yeah.
But doesn't, and this is up to the audience to decide, but it doesn't wallow. Sometimes that stuff bothers me that it wallows in that, and this one I think presents it in a light that...
Friend of the show and sometimes guest Lee recently watched this for the first time and texted me to tell me about this movie that I should watch. And I'm like, thanks, buddy.
We got it.
I got you covered. But yes, I'm glad that he saw it and discovered it on his own. It's one of those films that deserves more play. Okay, real quickly, Bonnie and Clyde versus Night Moves. What you got?
Night Moves.
I'm Night Moves all the way.
The only complaint I have is that the Bob Seger song was not in it, as you would expect.
It came out 1 year later.
Yeah.
I'm going Night Moves too, so it's a unanimous one. I do have a bit of trivia about Bonnie and Clyde. I found this out in a Wikipedia rabbit hole following watching the movie. One of my favorite bands from the 70s is Steve Winwood's Traffic. And Michael J. Pollard, who plays the CW character in this, suggested the title of Low Spark of High-Heeled Boys.
Really?
He was on set for a movie that never happened with Jim Capaldi from Traffic in Morocco, and they had spent apparently several weeks smoking hash and writing lyrics and getting fucked up. And in an inscription to him right before he left, in a note to him, he said something about "It's just the low spark of high-heeled boys," and then that became the song. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the final pairing. Then we start to get into the
About
meat.
an hour and some odd into it.
Yeah. Number
It'll
15.
go faster.
Number 15, Scarecrow from 1973, 76% on Rotten Tomatoes, directed by Jerry Schatzberg. Al Pacino, Gene Hackman, Dorothy Tristan, Richard Hackman, relation? Al Sigolani and Penelope Allen, a gruff ex-con and an ex-seaman, share a series of adventures while traveling across America. They learn a lot about life on their travels as hitchhikers.
I like this movie.
Me too.
I like it's a good acting film. I would put it that way, and it's got a light touch to it. I think.
I kind of liked the George and Lenny dynamic that the two of them had.
Yeah.
Especially after what's his face, Dustin Hoffman's character gets the shit beat out of him, and he kind of withdraws even more into himself than.
You mean Al Pacino?
I mean, yeah. Al Pacino. He becomes even more. He's very childlike to begin with, but then he has, I guess, brain damage, and he becomes.
Yeah, it's really like Of Mice and Men, like totally.
Yeah.
It's like you said. It's one of those movies. It's just like, here it is, and there you go.
It's nice.
It's nice. It's going up against number 2 seed Unforgiven from 1992.
That's unfortunate.
96% on Rotten Tomatoes, directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Clint Eastwood. This is the beginning of the Get Off My Lawn series. Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, Richard Harris, Anna Thompson, Francis Fisher, Jamie Woolvett, and Saul Rubinek.
Yeah.
When prostitute Delilah Fitzgerald is disfigured by a pair of cowboys in Big Whiskey, Wyoming, her fellow brothel workers post a reward for their murder. Much to the displeasure of Sheriff Little Bill Daggett, played by Gene Hackman, who doesn't allow vigilantism in his town. Two groups of gunfighters, one led by aging former bandit William Money, played by Clint Eastwood, the other by the florid English Bob, played by Richard Harris, come to collect the reward, clashing with each other and the sheriff. Mm-hmm. That's not quite accurate. They never actually clash with each other, but they do clash with the sheriff.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
This was the last film I watched in preparation for this episode. I loved this movie when I was in college. I love it a lot less now.
Really?
I still like it.
I did not rewatch this one because I felt like I saw it in the theaters when it came out. A roommate of mine at one time had the DVD, so I've seen it, multiple times since then. And in my memory, it's fucking great.
Yeah. I mean, what you have, again, is one of these morally ambiguous situations, because the Little Bill character is kind of the villain of the movie, the guy you don't like, but he's kind of, like, justified in what he's trying to do, right? He's trying to keep the vigilantism out of the town. Now, there's some chicanery with that, but at the same time, it's not, completely misunderstood. And then you have the Will Money character played by Eastwood, who is the hero, but he's also sort of a reformed bad guy, but now he's going to go back and be a bounty hunter again, but for noble reasons. So it creates this sort of weird moral middle ground, like gray area, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I really like it. Morgan Freeman, of course, doing his Morgan Freeman things. I like the kid character, who's sort of the moral...
Schofield Kid.
The Schofield Kid, yep. And turns out to be nearsighted, and then,
He's never killed anyone.
Yeah, it's...
This movie came out in
'92,
early '90s. I don't know if there's a name for it, but there's that '90s revisionist western, kind of influenced by, coming on the heels of like the spaghetti westerns. And then you had the kind of a western revival in the '90s with this one and Tombstone and White
Young Guns,
blah blah blah. This was, in my memory at least, I need to go back and watch all these. One of the better of that.
Oh yeah,
group of films.
What was the one Gene Hackman was also in with Sharon Stone?
The Quick and the Dead.
Quick and the Dead.
Yeah. Did not make the bracket.
No, yeah.
All right.
So what is it that you just out of? Well, maybe we can save it for another.
Yeah,
one.
let's save it because that
It's
might
gonna
be a
go through.
decider.
Yeah.
I say it goes through over Scarecrow, even though I like Scarecrow.
I like Scarecrow, but Unforgiven. Yeah,
I like Scarecrow
Any-
too. It was a nice surprise. Unfortunate that it came up against a juggernaut in the 2 seed here. But,
Okay, so now we are going to go into the Elite Eight, and if there's something you want to say in favor or against one of the films, otherwise we're just going to go straight into votes.
Okay.
But you bring in what you need. We have The French Connection going up against Crimson Tide.
French Connection.
This one's a slam dunk.
Yeah.
A blowout. French Connection.
As good as Crimson Tide is,
Yeah, there's nothing against
but
it.
The French Connection is one of the great action films
Yep.
ever. So
All right, the next one then, The Royal Tenenbaums versus Superman.
Oh, I've been dreading this.
now, see, this is interesting because I picked against Royal Tenenbaums in the previous round, but I'm going with Royal Tenenbaums this time against Superman.
I knew that this was gonna. In my mind, we were gonna have 4 people here, and it was gonna be a tie. And we were gonna make your wife do the deciding vote. So I feel like I'm the deciding vote here. Royal Tenenbaums is probably a better film than Superman, but Superman has a special place in my heart, and I am voting for Superman.
You're going for sentiment. I'm going to have to boil it down to the Gene Hackman performances.
Ooh,
That's still tough.
That could still go either way.
Yeah.
Because as we noted in the first round, he is Lex Luthor.
I know.
But then you yourself lauded his performance as Royal.
Yeah.
So.
I'm going to have to go against my gut on this, and I'm going to go Royal Tenenbaums.
Wow. Okay. I
Because-
thought Superman was going to get it.
No, it's only because I think that that his performance as Royal is a more nuanced performance, where as Lex Luthor is
I got no problem with that.
one-dimensional performance, but he does it so well.
He plays a great note.
Okay.
But yeah.
The Conversation versus the Poseidon Adventure.
The Conversation. Let's be real, folks.
Conversation, yeah. I mean, I gushed about the Poseidon Adventure. I just watched it a few days ago. I enjoyed the hell out of it.
I enjoyed it.
Conversation. That did, yeah.
All right. Night Moves versus The Unforgiven.
Ooh, this one's kind of tough for me. Fuck. I guess I'm going to go with Night Moves. I kind of wanted to do Unforgiven, but I'm going to go with Night Moves. In a squeaker. Do, 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 do. Sorry.
I feel like these are fairly equal footing. If we're going to press the basketball analogy, this is a buzzer beater type situation. Triple overtime. You know, you're fouling at the end to try to, you know.
Yeah. We're firing at Gary Goldsmith.
I feel like Night Moves. I feel like Unforgiven is a more important film than Night Moves. Night Moves is very good, but it does kind of get lost in the shuffle of neo-noir. Unforgiven is the absolute gold standard of 90s revisionist westerns. I'm going to give it my vote.
Okay. I don't have a problem.
So it's to me, eh?
The 3 goes up. It's still up.
Little Bill Daggett.
Which performance do you like better?
It's
Now you got a great classic line in Unforgiven too. I didn't deserve this. Deserves got nothing to do with it. Now that was Eastwood's line. Though.
I don't say this to try to sway your vote, but this is a Gene Hackman tribute episode, and Night Moves is very much his movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Whereas he's a very good, but a supporting actor in Unforgiven.
I'm going Night Moves.
Okay,
it's an upset. It's an upset because, again, in watching these movies in the last 2.5 weeks, this movie as a film kills it. Gene Hackman just nails it in his role as a private investigator. Unforgiven, I felt if I'd be really just contemptible. So yeah, Night Moves.
In our final four, then we have the 1 seed, the 3 seed, the 10 seed, and the 12 seed.
Yes,
got some Cinderellas up in here.
All right, so now we've got the French Connection versus the Royal Tenenbaums.
Whew. Okay. This isn't that hard for me. I got to go with the French Connection in a 15-ish point blowout.
That's the same for me. Popeye Doyle gets it every single time.
They're picking their toes in Poughkeepsie.
Then you get, now this is great because you've got some very noirish kind of elements in both of these movies. Conversation versus Night Moves.
Now this one's hard. I think I'm going to have to go with The Conversation, though, because that's, to me, one of the best films of the 70s. Night Moves, as good as it is, not as important, certainly. So, yeah.
Yeah, the Night Moves is a great neo-noir. But it is, as I said earlier, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle of neo-noirs. It's a very damn good one. The Conversation, you mentioned it as part of a spiritual trilogy earlier, but it's kind of a singular film in some ways, and it, to me, is superior for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I'm going with The Conversation. So now...
we got a final. Now this is the
French Connection versus The Conversation.
Man, this is tough, man. I'm going with The Conversation. Maybe in a little bit of an upset, but I just, as much as I like The French Connection and love it, I just love, it's just, The Conversation is just so unique. And the techniques that they use to pull off that character and that plot device with the sound, and the sound became, part of the movie. I'm going to go with The Conversation, yep.
I am a sucker for... I've said this on this podcast before. The 1970s was the absolute pinnacle of...
cinema.
It's not just cinema, of music, art, everything.
Pretty much everything, yeah.
And I'm a sucker for especially like proto-electronic music and like the kinds of music, Robert Fripp and Kraftwerk inventing the instruments that they're playing on these proto-electronic albums. And The Conversation for me embodies this world that does not exist anymore and will never exist again, where this analog world, and it is great for that reason. It's nostalgic, but it's kind of cutting edge at the time, and it is just a great movie. The French Connection is a damn good film, don't get me wrong. But The Conversation to me is in the rarefied air of one of the true greats of all time, so I'm voting for The Conversation.
My vote doesn't matter. But I will say this. The French Connection is a cut above your typical cop procedural of its time.
Mm-hmm.
However,
one of the best.
However, it is a cop procedural of its time.
Right.
I'd put it in the same rarefied category as The Naked City in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Conversation is, despite being, as you said, the spiritual trilogy, it is a creature unto itself.
Yeah.
And it is a unique film. And Gene Hackman's character is a unique character. He's quiet. He's insular. He's methodical. He's committed. But he's human as well. He has his fun with that girl, you know, that fucks him over for the tapes. Yep. And then, of course, he gets so into the story. He gets so into what happens. And then for me, I mentioned this to Joey, casting Cindy Williams in her role, because at that time there was no one more innocent than Cindy Williams, coming off American Graffiti, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley. Didn't see it coming. When it happens, blows your fucking mind. So The Conversation, as I said in my review, only gets better every single damn time I watch this movie. And I'm surprised it's our winner tonight. The Conversation, the best Gene Hackman movie ever.
Fire up Jerry Goldsmith. Boo, 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 doo, doo, doo. Or it's One Shining Moment. One Shining Moment. The 60, the NCAA song.
I got you.
So that's it. I'm glad that everyone decided to come check out the episode and pay tribute to Gene Hackman. You know, what a guy. Even his shitty movies, I made a joke about Welcome to Mooseport. He's still cool.
I like that movie. It's fun.
You wanted to hang out with Gene Hackman, you know?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So,
and he wasn't like a classically good-looking guy either.
No.
He was one of those guys that was like middle-aged for his entire life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Like I said, he was 37 or 38 when he did Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah,
so
he had
the
the receding hairline. He had the little freckle dots up by the top of his hairline, and he wasn't a handsome Hollywood dashing actor.
Almost a perfect guy to represent New Hollywood, really.
Right. Yeah.
He's not the classic, square-jawed leading man. So, and he could do either. He could be the leading man and pull that off, or he could play the villain, or he could do a character actor.
Think about like the range from The Coach and Hoosiers to, the
Little Bill Daggett.
Exactly.
I mean, just a tremendous amount of range, and damn, what a great actor! And rest in peace, rest in power to him and his wife. It's sad that it happened, but it happens to all of us.
Hell of a run, 95 there.
Yeah. All right, plugs for anybody?
I have one. I know this is a movie podcast, but if any of our readers, if any of our listeners are readers, I have started a Substack project where I'm trying to read a book from every country in the world, and I'm currently at about 16 or 17.
Oh.
And you can find it if you're interested in those kind of things at Bookmark Planet on Substack. And they're not book reviews necessarily. I'd write more about like the experience of doing it and tying in my own experiences into these books. But check that out if you're interested.
Cool. Todd, you got anything?
No.
Yeah, I don't have anything either. I did have plans for our next episode, but since Travis didn't show, that's going to be shelved until the next time the four of us are together. Okay. So I don't know what the next episode will be, but it will be in 2 weeks. So I'm open to suggestions and recommendations from anybody. We are on social media as Cinema Chop Shop. We are also Cinema Chop Shop Podcast on YouTube, as well as Blue Sky. So if you're not on Blue Sky, goodbye. Get with it. Blue Sky. Please rate, review, subscribe. Please remember to love your neighbor, love your family, love yourself. Tell your people that you love them and do kind things for people. You'll feel good about it, and they will enjoy it too. And in the meantime, please remember to watch, shop, retrofit.